Hi guys, this is Tekken57. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how to port models from SmackDown vs. Raw 2008 right up to SmackDown vs. Raw 2011 to WWE 2K14 for the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3. For today's tutorial I'm going to be using the Terry Funk SmackDown vs. Raw 2008 model to demonstrate. Okay, so firstly, the model is in the old YObject format. So you can open the model using Ctrl+O in X-Ray to view the model. The first thing we want to do is convert this model into the newer format so that it can be imported into the Studio Max. So the way we do this is we go into the Utilities option and make sure you select the correct option. So because this is a 2008 model, we use the convert less than 2009 model option. We click that and we select the main YObject file. Okay, this will take a little while to process, but once this is done, it will convert this into the newer model format. Alright, once you see the conversion completed notification, the model has been converted. If you want to verify that it has been converted, you can use it. You can open the. If you want to verify that this model has been converted, you can use Ctrl+N just to view the file, and it should load up without any issue. Alright, now we're going to import this model into 3D Studio Max. So I've provided a link to my Max scripts file, which is included in the description. So the script we're going to be using is the WWE 2K12 to 2K17 Xbox 360 Tekken57 MS file. So we double click this in 3D Studio Max, and I'm going to go to the folder in which I'm working. And I'm going to open up the file which has been converted. So 0 converted. .YObject. Alright, once the model has been loaded, you'll notice that it has a correct rig. If you move any of the bones around, the model should move correctly. So now we need to decide which model we want to rig this to for a 2K14 base. So I'm going to be using the Justin Gabriel 2K14 model as a base. You can use any model that you wish. So firstly, let's create a folder for all the Justin Gabriel model meshes. So I'm just going to call it Gabriel meshes. Alright. I'm going to open up this file in X-Ray, which is the Justin Gabriel model, and I'm just going to export all the meshes. So click Export All, Gabriel meshes. Right, now that the Gabriel meshes have been exported, we're going to import these into 3D Studio Max so we can position and scale our model to fit the 2K14 scaling. So go into the Sort by Layer tab, and then let's create a new layer which we can add our models to. Okay, so I'm just going to click on Create New Layer. Okay, you can call this something if you'd like this to make it descriptive, not really necessary. Right, and then from here we're going to import the Justin Gabriel meshes. Now I use a batch import export script. You can just search for this, it's a free script, and install it into 3D Studio Max. It'll make your life a lot easier because it can import multiple meshes in one go. So I'm just going to copy this location, and I'm going to put this into the script. I'm going to select object files, and I'm going to import all of the objects. Okay, the reason why I've created a separate layer is so that when you import the meshes, you can tell which are the Justin Gabriel meshes and which are your Terry Funk meshes. Otherwise, you'll have naming conflicts and that sort of thing. Okay, we have the Justin Gabriel meshes loaded. I'm just going to freeze these as well, because we don't really need to work with it. We just have it for positioning. Alright, now go back to the Sort by Hierarchy tab. And now we need to select the root bone of our Terryfunk model. We're going to scale this up to make it 10 times the size. So the easiest way to do this is to click the root bone, right-click the Scale and Uniform Scale button, and then where it says Offset World, make this 1000 to make it 10 times the size. Alright, and then thereafter we're going to move the root bone upwards. Okay, position your model to fit the Justin Gabriel model. That looks about correct. Alright, and then thereafter we are going to hide the Justin Gabriel model. So we just go back to our layers, and I'm going to hide that. We don't really need it anymore. Okay, at this point it's probably a good idea to save your file. So save frequently so that you don't lose any of your work. So I'm just going to call this Terryfunk 2K14 rig. The next step that we need to do is to change the names of the bones in this model to match the bone names in 2K14. In doing so, it'll prevent us from having to re-rig the model, and we can use the weights of the model as is. So I've written a script to rename the bones, and 8619 has made some changes to the script to make it a bit better and to add some error trapping. Also a big thank you to 8619 because he's also done quite a bit of work in actually matching the bone names from the older model format to the newer model format, which allows us to run the script, which you will see shortly. So I'm going to click on scripting, run script. Okay, and I'm going to use the rename bones script by 8619. So I'll just click that. Alright, and now it'll ask you for a bone names or text file. So I've included the dictionary of files, which is created by Eddie. So we'll use this file, bone dictionary corrected 8619. Okay, and this will go through the model and rename all of the bones appropriately. Alright, so once this is done, we have the bone names now converted to the bone names of 2K14 models. Alright, so now we're going to export the weights. So I'm going to select all of the objects that's listed. I'm going to click on scripting, run script, and we export the bone weights. So I've created a script called export bone weights to file multiple, which will export all of these into separate text files for each of the measures. Let's do that. And let's create a folder called weights. Alright, and then thereafter let's also export the bone names. So we run the script called export bone names to file multiple, and we'll create a directory called bone names. Right, and we select that folder, and this will export the bone names. The way in which the Xbox 360 and PS3 models works is that it lists the bones which are mapped to each mesh in the header of the YObject file, and that's the reason why we need to export the bone names. Alright, so now that we have this done, we also want to export these meshes with the new size that we've done, where we scaled it up to 10 times the size. So I'm going to open up my batch export script again, and I'm going to go into this directory. I'm just going to call create a folder, and I'm going to call it objects. You can call it whatever you want. Alright, I'm going to select that, paste that in there, and then make sure you click on export selection, not export all, otherwise it will start exporting the bones as well, which you don't really need, and it will take a very long time to run. So let's just export all of these. Alright, now that these have been exported, go back to X-Ray, open up the Terryfunk model which we've converted into the new format, and import all of the scaled objects. So inject all objects, go into the objects folder and select inject. Alright, so you won't really notice a difference in the viewport, but the model is actually 10 times bigger. Alright, so now we are ready to export all of the data from this Y object, and we're going to now create a new Y object using this data. So click on extract all. Okay, create a folder called headers. You can call it whatever you want. Let's click that. So this has now exported all of the header info for this Y object. So importantly, when you are rigging, when you are creating a new Y object, there are certain meshes in here which would cause the game to crash. So you do not want the teeth object, which is object 2 in this case, and you do not want the tongue object, which is object 3 in this case. We're going to use the teeth and tongue object from the Justin Gabriel model, which I'll show you how to do shortly. There's also a couple of other meshes which create problems, which are these objects here, object 22 and object 21, because these are meshes which they use for displaying the blood of models. This only appears in SmackDown vs. Raw 2008. I don't really see it in any of the others. So we just want to delete those just to make sure we don't add those. So let's go into headers, and we are going to delete object 21 and 22, both the header and object info. We don't need that. And also, as I said, object 2 and object 3. Okay, so let's just open the Justin Gabriel model to find where the teeth object is, so we can add this to our build as well. Let's find it. Okay, there we go, object 12. So I'm just going to click on extract. I'll just place it in the same directory. Okay, so now name this teeth object any number that doesn't appear in our list. So we don't have an object 2 and 3 because I've deleted that. So we can name this object 2. Name both the header and the object info object 2. You can name it something else if you'd like. You can make it a higher number than what we have in this list as well. For instance, we have 20. You can make it 22 or 23. Doesn't really make a difference. It'll just change the ordering of the meshes when we actually build the model. Alright, so now that we have the teeth and the tongue from the Justin Gabriel model, we're going to create a new Xbox 360 Y object file, which is under the new Y object file, Xbox 360, or the Control+3 option. Alright, so now we're going to select the Justin Gabriel model as the base model, and then thereafter we're going to click on select meshes. Now from here we're going to select all of the headers that we've previously exported. I'm going to open up all of these. Alright, so all of the headers have been loaded. Now here we need to do a couple of things. Firstly, we need to check the mesh name. Only the I meshes should have I listed to it. So we can quickly look at 3D Studio Max and just confirm what each object is. So 1 and 2 is I, so the naming is correct there. The other meshes, it doesn't really matter what name you assign to it, as long as it's not I. You can make it to it or body, and it doesn't really make a difference. Alright, now importantly, we don't want to use the shaders that are in the objects, because the shaders are coming from 2008. It will cause the game to crash. So we want to change this to the appropriate shader. So because these first two are I meshes, we'll select I. Okay, then now we need to confirm what the other meshes are. So you can either open up another instance of X-Ray and you can check, or you can check it in 3D Studio Max. Whichever you prefer. I'm just going to open up another instance of X-Ray, and I'm going to open up the converted model just to see what each mesh is, so we can assign it the appropriate shaders. So object 1, 2 we're not really going to use, 3 we're not using. If 4 is body, so we're going to select the skin with the body. 5 is also body. Okay, so these areas which are on the face, I've created another shader sample for you, which is a skin with face. So you can assign that it has a couple of more textures assigned to it for sweat and that sort of thing. You can also assign it a body texture if you want, but if you want the actual face effects textures to be loaded, then you should assign it the face texture. Okay, 8 is a body as well. 9 is face. Okay, 10 is body. 11 is the inner part of the mouth, so we'll also make that body. 12 is face. 13 face. 14 face. Face as well. I've done 14 by accident, so 14 and 15 are face, that's fine. 16 is also face. 17 is the tights. Let's just check it. 17, 18, 19. So 17 is a gear, so you can leave this as gear, but just make sure you select use param samples. Okay, and then we've got object 18, which is the boots. So we can also leave that as shoes. 19 and 20 are both body meshes, so let's assign those to body. Okay, and then we click on create my object. So I'm just going to call this func 2K14 port. Okay, let's just check it with our second instance of X-ray while I still have the create dialog open. I like to use the second instance just to make sure I haven't made any mistakes before closing that dialog. Alright, so now we've got the Terry Funk model, which is now on the Justin Gabriel base. Okay, we've exported the weights from 3D Studio Max using the export weights file, but we already have the weights in these because we've taken these from the header info. So the weights that I've exported, I'm just keeping it as a backup in case something goes wrong. But 99% of the time, you don't have to import the weights. What we do need to do is import the bone names because these have changed. So we're going to click on edit, right click and select edit object header, import bone refs, and here we're going to import the names which we've exported. So we're going to open up the bone names file. Alright, it now has changed the bone references to match the Justin Gabriel references. Importantly, you must change the material effect to 0 or the game will crash. Click on save values. Okay, and we're going to do this for all of the meshes. But what you need to know is that you need to do this for every single mesh, and you must change the material effect for every single mesh. For the teeth object, we don't need to do anything because we've imported this from the Justin Gabriel model, which already has the correct weights, bone names, etc. So we'll skip that. Okay, so let's do this for the rest as well. Alright, I should just mention also that because we've actually removed one of the objects, the naming of the exported names is different because we had object 2 and 3, which we've deleted, and we've added, instead of 2 objects, we've added 1 object. So therefore, when the file is exported from 3D Studio Max, object 14 is actually object 15 because now we've replaced 2 meshes with 1. So when you're importing the weights again, so when you're importing the bone names again, a good way to verify that you've imported the correct names is to look at the number of bones before you import and then the number of bones after you import. Because we've deleted one of the meshes, I'm actually importing object 15 instead of object 14. If you haven't deleted the meshes, your naming should be correct. So if I double click object 15, you'll see that the number of bones is still 9. So let's change the material effect. Let's do the next one just to see as well. Object 15, the number of bones is 9. Let's go to object 16, also 9 after import, and we change that to 0. So just make sure you're importing the correct names from the text file. Alright, so now I've imported all of the names. As I mentioned before, we don't need to import the weights because the weights are already in the file. I just want to discuss possible errors that you could get when importing these files. I'm going to the names file for object 20, and if I add another bone name here which doesn't exist, just to simulate an error, I'm just going to call this Tekken 57, which obviously doesn't exist in the model. Yeah, I'm just going to save this as I actually have my original as a backup to import again. Tekken 57, alright? So if I try to import this, because this bone doesn't exist, we're going to get an error. So let's import it, see what happens. Okay, so you'll get an index was outside the bounds of array object. So sometimes you'll find that some models have additional bounds, which the 2K14 model does not have. This is the reason why you would get this error. So in this case, there's two ways in which you can resolve it. The one is you can actually replace the bone name in the text file that is exported with a valid name, such as BIP. But the way you would determine which bone name to replace it with is you can look at the actual model, hide this, and look at what the mesh is attached to. So for instance, that mesh was attached to obviously the spine mesh and the clavicle, etc. So for instance, if this bone doesn't exist, the clavicle bone doesn't exist in your new model, the best practice is usually to look for the parent bone, which is assigned to. So you can either look at this bone, or you can look at that bone. If this bone doesn't exist, then obviously look at the parent of that bone, which is the clavicle. So you would replace it in that file. Second alternative is to actually add it to the dictionary of bone names file, which we use to rename using the script. So the way this file works is it has a bone name, which is the old bone name. The next line has the new bone name. So in this case, if we want to have a bone name that's called Tekken 57, we can add this bottom, and then we can add a valid bone to rename it to, for instance, BIP. Okay, and if you do that and save it, it will rename the bone appropriately. So you need to rerun that rename bone script and then export this file again. I'm just going to remove this so I don't actually add it to the file. Alright, so like I said, it's only in certain instances where you'll find this happens. You'll find with like models like Sabu and Sandman, where they have like belt or like a handkerchief in his back pocket, because those have additional bones which are specialized to the movement of those objects. You won't find this in the 2K and 14 models, and obviously we don't have a name for it here. So I've added the exceptions like I've mentioned for Sandman and Sabu in here, but you may encounter models where the bones are not named correctly. So that's just something you need to be aware of. Alright, so now we've prepped the model. We also need to now prep the texture. So I'm just going to open up the color and the normal. Okay, so the textures are in a different format. So you'll see that there's this texture in the alpha channel of the color map which contains a sweat. This is not needed for 2K14, so we're going to save this as in the same format as a 2K14 color map, which is DXT1 with 4 maps. So you're going to click on save. Okay, so the normal map has an alpha channel, which is actually correct and is required. I'm just going to scale this up to be the same size. So I'm going to click on image size. I'm going to make it the same size as the 2K14 normal maps, which is 2048 by 1024. Not necessary, but I like to increase the resolution so that it renders better in game. Okay, I'm going to click on save, and then for this you need to ensure that you select DXT5, which also includes the alpha channel, and then with 4 maps. Alright, so now we have the textures and the model prepped. So we can inject this into a pack, and let's test this in game. You can put it into any pack you want. Okay, I'm going to put it into the first attire slots. I'm just going to use a compress and inject. You can inject if you want. I prefer using compress and inject so I don't have to rebuild the arc. Alright, so let's import the Funk model, Funk 2K14 port. Okay, let's inject the color texture. Save the color texture in the correct format. You should be able to inject without getting any kind of error. And then thereafter we're going to check the normal as well. Let's go normal. Okay, and now let's copy this into our game directory. Because I have used a compress and inject, I don't need to update the arc. If you've changed the file size of the pack, obviously you need to update the arc as well. Alright, and now let's run this. I'm using Xenia to test. Now I'm going to go into the creation, and let's go into story mode so we can see the model in game. Okay, and you can see that the model has been loaded correctly. There's no issues with the rig, the mouth moves correctly, the eyes move correctly, etc. And we didn't need to re-import the weights or having to re-rig the model at all. Okay, one last thing you need to do obviously is to position the mouth object again in the correct space. So let's do that. So let's find our mouth object. Let's export that. Okay, so let's import that back into the 3D Studio Max scene we had prior to this. Let's go File, Import, Object 2. Doesn't matter what it's named. Okay, so let's go to where this object is. I'm just going to hide the head so we can see this a bit better. Let's hide these also. Okay, so where is our object? Object 36. Let's go into that. Also. Okay, and now let's move this to align with the teeth of the original base model of Terry Funk. So let's move that down. Okay, that looks pretty good. See if it's okay. So that looks correct. Let's export that, and we're exporting as object. Okay, we'll go back into our X-ray and we can inject object. Alright, so now the teeth object should appear properly in game. If you have any issues with regards to the eyes and the mouth moving, then you may need to move the bones for the eyes and the mouth as necessary, but I covered this in previous tutorials. Alright, one last thing. Unfortunately, this method does not work for SmackDown vs. Raw 2007 models because the face objects are a completely different format. So you will need to use the previous method which I have described, which is re-rigging the meshes and exporting these into NUF, etc. So if you need more information on that, you can view the previous tutorial I've posted. Alright, all in all, this method is a much quicker method because without having to re-rig, re-import weights, etc., it cuts down the amount of time to actually port a model. And the rig of the model is actually perfect. You don't have any issues in game with it. All in all, it should take you around about 20 minutes to half an hour to port a model. Obviously a bit faster once you get more proficient with the process. Alright, that's the end of the tutorial for today. I hope this tutorial was helpful to you, and that it will help you to port your models a lot faster. So thank you very much for watching this video. Remember to subscribe and like this video. Until next time, happy modding and take care.